My name is Luke, and at 34, I never thought my biggest betrayal would come from family. I spent years building my life, finally purchasing my dream home, where I proudly hosted our annual family reunion. I trust my family with everything, which is why I ignored the warning signs when my sister Jessica started struggling financially after marrying Rick. That weekend, I caught Rick lingering near my home office repeatedly. But I brushed it off. Family is family, right? If only I had known what would happen after everyone left. Before I continue this story, let me know where you all are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me through this painful but important journey. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, I learned early that nothing comes easy. My parents, both public school teachers, instilled in me and my sister Jessica the value of hard work and education. I took those lessons seriously, working part-time jobs throughout high school to save for college, then pulling all-nighters balancing computer science classes with a campus tech support job. After graduation, I scored an entry-level position at a software company, living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment to save every possible dollar. 10 years of dedication, 3 promotions, and countless overtime hours later, I finally achieved what once seemed impossible: purchasing my own house. Not just any house, but a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a spacious backyard in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of place I had dreamed about while staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom. The kind of accomplishment that made my parents beam with pride when they first walked through the front door. "Luke, this place is absolutely gorgeous," my mom had said, running her hand along the granite kitchen countertop during her first visit. "Your father and I always knew you would do well, but this exceeds everything we hoped for you." The house represented more than just walls and a roof. It symbolized everything I had worked for, every sacrifice I had made. I paid for it entirely on my own. No family loans, no inheritance, just years of saving and smart financial planning. That fact mattered to me because independence had always been my driving force. My sister Jessica followed a different path. Equally smart but more artistically inclined, she pursued a degree in graphic design. We remained close through college, calling each other weekly to catch up on life and share our struggles. 5 years ago, she met Rick at an art gallery opening. Their relationship moved quickly, and within 6 months, they were engaged. I still remember the first time I met Rick. Tall, charismatic, always dressed impeccably with designer clothes that seemed beyond the budget of his marketing coordinator salary. Something about him felt off. But Jessica was happier than I had ever seen her. So I kept my reservations to myself. Their wedding was lavish, surprisingly expensive, and afterward, they moved into a luxury apartment that raised questions in my mind about financial stability. Over the years, I noticed subtle changes in Jessica. Phone calls became less frequent. When we did talk, she would deflect questions about their finances, changing the subject whenever I asked how they were doing. Occasionally, she would call asking if I could loan them money for unexpected expenses, which seemed to pile up with suspicious frequency. Despite these concerns, family remained paramount in my life, which is why, when I finally settled into my new home, I volunteered to host the annual family reunion that had rotated between relatives for decades. I spent weeks preparing, wanting everything to be perfect. I deep cleaned every room, hired landscapers to make the yard immaculate, planned a menu that accommodated everyone's dietary preferences, and even created personalized welcome baskets for each family member. The morning of the reunion, I woke before sunrise, too excited to sleep. I prepared a massive breakfast spread: pancakes, waffles, eggs, 3 ways, bacon, sausage, fresh fruit, and my grandmother's secret recipe cinnamon rolls that always disappeared within minutes. The coffee was brewing. Mimosas were ready to be poured. And I had even created a playlist of family favorites, spanning multiple generations. Relatives began arriving around 10 in the morning. First came Uncle James and Aunt Patricia, with their teenage twins, then my cousins from Seattle, followed by my parents who immediately started helping with last-minute preparations, despite my insistence that they relax and enjoy themselves. "Luke, this house is magnificent," my father said, placing his hand on my shoulder. "Your grandfather would have been so proud to see what you've built for yourself." The compliment meant everything. My grandfather had been my role model, a self-made man who started a small construction business and built it through sheer determination. His photo sat prominently on my mantle, a daily reminder of the legacy I wanted to honor. Jessica and Rick arrived last, nearly an hour after everyone else. Jessica hugged me tightly, whispering how much she had missed me. Rick gave me a firm handshake that lasted a beat too long, his eyes not meeting mine but instead scanning the entryway, taking inventory of what I owned. "Nice place, Luke," he said, nodding appreciatively. "Must have cost a fortune." "It was an investment," I replied simply, not wanting to discuss finances. "Mind if I use your bathroom?" Rick asked, already moving toward the hallway. "Guest bathroom is right there." I pointed to the door near the kitchen, but Rick was already heading deeper into the house. "Rick, it's this way," Jessica called after him, giving me an apologetic glance. "I want to check out the house tour," he called back. "I bet Luke has a nicer bathroom upstairs anyway." I laughed it off, telling Jessica not to worry about it. But throughout the day, I noticed Rick disappearing frequently, always returning from different parts of the house. At one point, he asked detailed questions about my home security system, wondering if I had cameras inside the house or just exteriors. Later, he inquired about my work schedule, if I traveled often, and whether I lived alone. "Just curious about how you manage such a big place by yourself," he explained when I gave him a questioning look. The questions seemed innocent enough at the time. After all, this was family. What could possibly go wrong? The reunion was progressing beautifully through the afternoon. Cousins I rarely saw were catching up in the living room, sharing stories and laughter. Uncle James had taken charge of the grill in the backyard, flipping burgers and debating politics with anyone willing to engage. The younger kids had set up a makeshift soccer game on the lawn, their shrieks of joy providing a perfect soundtrack to the gathering. I was in the kitchen preparing another round of drinks when my cousin Michael pulled me aside, his expression unusually serious. "Hey, I just thought you should know," he whispered, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "I saw Rick trying to use your computer in the office. When I walked by, he quickly closed whatever he was looking at and pretended to be admiring your bookshelves." A small alarm bell rang in my head, but I pushed it aside. "Maybe he was just checking his email or something," I suggested, not wanting to jump to conclusions. Michael shrugged. "Maybe. Just seemed weird how quickly he shut everything when he saw me. And why use your computer when he has his phone?" After Michael walked away, I casually made my way to my home office. The door was slightly ajar, though I distinctly remembered closing it before guests arrived. Inside, nothing seemed immediately out of place, but my desk chair was pulled out at an angle different from how I usually left it. My computer screen was in sleep mode, requiring a password to access, so I felt somewhat reassured. Still, something felt off. I checked my desk drawers all closed, but was that middle one fully shut earlier? I couldn't be certain. My filing cabinet appeared untouched, the key still in the place I had hidden it behind a framed photo. Perhaps Rick had just been curious about my workspace. After all, the house tour earlier hadn't included my office. I decided to return to the party before anyone noticed my absence. On my way out, I quietly locked the office door and pocketed the key. Better safe than sorry, I thought, though I immediately felt guilty for the gesture of distrust toward family. Back in the kitchen, I found Rick leaning against the counter, nursing a beer and watching me intently. "Nice setup you have in that office," he commented casually. "Must be convenient working from home sometimes." "Do you keep all your important documents there?" "Some," I answered vaguely. "Most of my stuff is digital these days." Smart. He nodded. "How do you keep track of all your passwords?" "I always forget mine. Drives Jessica crazy when I keep asking her to reset them for me." The question seemed innocent enough, but combined with Michael's observation, it raised my guard. "I use a password manager," I said, deliberately not specifying which one. "Those things are lifesavers," Rick agreed enthusiastically. "Which one do you recommend?" "The one I use keeps glitching on me." Before I could answer, Jessica joined us, slipping her arm through Rick's. "Are you boring my brother with tech talk?" she teased, but I noticed the tightness around her eyes, the way she squeezed Rick's arm a little too firmly. Just getting some expert advice, Rick replied smoothly, planting a kiss on her forehead that somehow seemed performative. As the afternoon transitioned into evening, we gathered around the large dining table I had set up in the backyard. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere despite the size of our group. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, topics ranging from childhood memories to current events. During dinner, Rick steered the conversation toward money multiple times. He asked my uncle about his retirement investments, questioned my cousin about her recent home purchase, and finally turned the spotlight on me. So Luke, being single with such a successful career must leave you with quite the nest egg, he remarked, cutting into his steak. What's your secret? Stocks? Real estate? Crypto? The question hung awkwardly in the air. My family typically avoided direct discussions about money, considering it private. A little bit of everything, I answered diplomatically. Mostly just living below my means and consistent saving over time. Rick scoffed. Come on. There must be more to it than that. No one gets a house like this just by skipping Starbucks. Actually, my father interjected. Luke has always been exceptionally disciplined with his finances. Even as a teenager, he would save birthday money when other kids would spend it immediately. He worked through college when many take out massive loans. His success is well earned. I appreciated my father's defense but noticed how Rick's expression hardened. Must be nice having the privilege of good starting conditions, Rick muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Some of us had to overcome actual obstacles. Jessica placed her hand on his arm. Rick, please, she whispered. The tension was palpable until my mother deftly changed the subject, asking about my younger cousin's college applications. The moment passed, but I caught Rick staring at me throughout the remainder of dinner, something calculating in his gaze. As the night wound down, family members began to depart with warm hugs and promises to get together again soon. Jessica approached me as I was cleaning up the kitchen. Luke, would it be okay if Rick and I stayed over tonight? She asked, her voice unnaturally high. We had a few drinks, and I would feel safer not driving. We can take the guest room and be out of your hair first thing in the morning. Though tired and ready for solitude after a day of hosting, I couldn't refuse my sister. Of course, I agreed. The guest room is all made up. Thank you, she said, hugging me tightly. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, but she pulled away, avoiding my eyes. After showing them to the guest room and providing fresh towels, I retreated to my master bedroom on the opposite end of the hallway. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. The house creaked and settled in unfamiliar ways, or perhaps it was the knowledge that Rick was under my roof that kept me alert. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the hallway, followed by what sounded like my office door handle being tested. Fully awake now, I listened intently but heard nothing further. After several minutes of silence, I convinced myself it was just the normal sounds of an older home at night and eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, my body tense from the interrupted sleep. Making my way downstairs to start coffee, I passed my office and noticed immediately that the door was slightly ajar, though I was certain I had locked it the night before. Heart pounding, I pushed it open to find my computer monitor on, the screen displaying my desktop background rather than the login screen it should have shown. Someone had been in my office, someone had accessed my computer, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who that someone was. I stood frozen in the doorway of my office, staring at the illuminated computer screen that should have been locked, moving cautiously, as if sudden movements might destroy evidence. I approached my desk and jiggled the mouse. No password prompt appeared. Someone had already logged in. My stomach clenched as I opened my browser history, finding recent visits to my banking website at 2:17 a.m., precisely when I had heard those footsteps. With trembling fingers, I navigated to my email, finding several unread messages from my bank. Subject lines that made my blood run cold. Confirmation of transfer, large transaction alert, security notice, unusual activity. No, this cannot be happening. I logged into my primary checking account, the one containing the bulk of my savings, and felt physically ill. The balance, which had been just over $127,000 yesterday, now showed $2,431.76. Multiple transfers had been made overnight to accounts I didn't recognize. Frantically, I checked my other accounts. My emergency fund, decimated. My investment account, accessed and liquidated with expedited transfers. Even my 401k had been tampered with, though those funds would take longer to withdraw. All told, nearly $240,000 had vanished while I slept under the same roof as the thief. The shock gave way to a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of my desk. How could this happen? How did Rick get past my passwords? My security questions? My two-factor authentication? Then I remembered. My password manager. I always remained logged in on my personal computer, believing the device itself was secure. With access to that, Rick would have had keys to my entire financial kingdom. But how had he unlocked my computer in the first place? I searched my desk and found the answer in the form of a small notepad beside my keyboard. The top sheet was blank, but pressing a pencil lightly over it revealed the impression of what had been written on the previous page, my computer password, which I had jotted down for a colleague who needed access during a recent work emergency. I had torn off the page and shredded it, but never considered the impression left behind. The weight of my carelessness crushed me. Such a simple oversight. Such devastating consequences. A sound from the doorway snapped me back to the present. Jessica stood there in pajamas, her face pale. "Luke, everything okay?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't form words. Instead, I turned the monitor toward her, displaying the bank account with its damning evidence. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, eyes widening as she processed what she was seeing. "Luke, I don't understand. Where's Rick?" I managed to ask, my voice unnaturally calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Still sleeping," she whispered. But the way her eyes darted away told me otherwise. "Jessica," I said more firmly. "Where is Rick?" She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small. "Shower. He said he wanted to get an early start. Call him in here." "Now." She hesitated, tears forming in her eyes. "Luke, whatever you think happened. Now." "Jessica." My voice finally betrayed the anger simmering beneath the surface. She flinched but turned and called Rick's name. Moments later, he appeared in the doorway, hair wet from the shower, already fully dressed. Too ready, I realized, for someone supposedly planning a leisurely morning. "What's up?" he asked casually, but his eyes immediately fixed on the computer screen. A flicker of something recognition, guilt, perhaps even satisfaction crossed his face before he composed himself. "Care to explain this?" I asked, pointing to the transactions list. Rick frowned, approaching the desk with feigned confusion. "Explain what? Your banking? Why would I know anything about your finances?" "Cut the act, Rick. I know it was you." The transfers happened at exactly 2:17 a.m. when I heard someone in the hallway. My computer was accessed. Your browser history shows my banking sites, and over $200,000 of my money is gone. Jessica gasped at the amount, her hand clutching the doorframe for support. Rick's expression shifted, cycling through confusion, outrage, and finally, to my horror, a smirk of defiance. "Prove it," he challenged. "Prove I did anything. Maybe you have a virus. Maybe you were hacked. Maybe you make risky investments. You're too embarrassed to admit to your family." I opened my desk drawer and removed Rick's laptop, which I had discovered minutes earlier tucked partially under my couch. "You left this behind. Careless. I'm sure the police will find it very interesting, especially the screenshots I found in your downloads folder showing my account information." The color drained from Rick's face, but only momentarily. His features hardened into something cold and calculating. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes. I transferred your money. And you know what? We needed it more than you." The bluntness of his confession stunned me into silence. "You sit here in your perfect house, with your perfect job, and your perfect life," Rick continued, his voice rising. "Meanwhile, Jessica and I are drowning in debt. Medical bills from her surgery last year. Credit card interest rates that should be criminal. Rent that increases every year while my salary stays the same. Jessica sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Rick, you promised we would ask him for help. Not this. Ask him? Why? So he could look down on us? Judge our financial decisions? Lecture us about budgeting and cutting expenses, when the problem is, the entire system is rigged against people like us? So you just decided to take everything I've worked for? I asked, my voice breaking. Your own family? Rick scoffed. You'll recover. People like you always do. One call to your rich friends, one conversation with your bank manager, who probably plays golf with you, and you'll be fine. We were desperate, Luke. Jessica needed medication we couldn't afford. I turned to my sister, searching her face for confirmation or denial. It's true about the medical bills, she admitted quietly. After my endometriosis surgery, insurance only covered part of it. We owe nearly $30,000 to the hospital. But Rick, she looked up at her husband with dawning horror. You said we needed $15,000 at most. What about the rest of Luke's money? Rick shifted uncomfortably. There were other debts you didn't know about. What debts, Rick? Jessica demanded, rising from her chair. The question hung in the air, unanswered. In that moment of tension, a notification sound from Rick's phone broke the silence. Jessica, standing closer, glanced at the screen before Rick could snatch it away. Flight confirmations? She read. Confusion, giving way to understanding. To Cancun? First class? What is this, Rick? Insurance, he muttered. In case things went south, the betrayal was complete. Not only had Rick stolen from me, but he had been planning to flee, possibly without Jessica. The realization seemed to hit my sister like a physical blow. You were going to leave me, she whispered. After making me complicit in stealing from my own brother, I was going to send for you. Rick insisted. But the lie was transparent. I felt something break inside me. This man had not only robbed me of my financial security, but was destroying my sister's life in the process. The family I had trusted implicitly, had welcomed into my home, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Get out, I said quietly. Luke, be reasonable, Rick started. Get out, I roared, slamming my fist on the desk with such force that both Jessica and Rick jumped. Get out before I do something I'll regret. You heard him, Jessica said, her voice suddenly firm despite the tears. Get out, Rick. Rick looked between us, calculating his options. Fine, he finally said. Reaching for his laptop. Leave it, I ordered. That's evidence now. Of what? Your sister knew exactly what was happening. She's as guilty as I am. Right, Jess? The threatening undertone in his voice made Jessica shrink back. I never agreed to this, she insisted. You said we were just going to talk to Luke. Rick laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. Always so naive. Why do you think I needed your fingerprint on your phone last night? For a surprise gift? It was to bypass the authentication on Luke's accounts that were linked to your contact information. The revelation hit me like a truck. Of course. I had listed Jessica as my trusted contact for account recovery. With access to her phone and my password manager, Rick had been able to reset everything. You used me, Jessica whispered. I protected you, Rick countered. Made sure we could survive. Someone in this family had to take practical action instead of just empty promises to help someday. I reached for my phone. I'm calling the police. Rick moved with unexpected speed, grabbing my wrist. Think very carefully about that, Luke. Police means publicity. Means your company finding out their star programmer can't even secure his own accounts. Means your family knowing how easily you were duped. And for what? The money's already moved through 4 different accounts. Good luck ever seeing it again. His grip tightened painfully. Walk away. Consider it a family loan. We all move on with our lives. I stared into his eyes, seeing not my brother-in-law but a stranger, a predator who had targeted my family. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The tension in the room was suffocating. Rick still gripped my wrist, his knuckles white with pressure. Jessica stood frozen, her eyes darting between us like she was watching a tennis match with lethal stakes. With my free hand, I slowly reached for my phone again. "Luke, do not call the police," Rick warned, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Let go of me." I responded, matching his tone. For several heartbeats, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, Rick released my wrist, leaving angry red marks on my skin. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, my voice unnaturally calm, despite the chaos swirling inside me. "We can discuss this like adults when I return." Rick narrowed his eyes suspiciously but nodded. 5 minutes. "Then we figure this out without authorities." I walked out, feeling their eyes burning into my back. Once inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing my composure to crack. My hands shook violently as the full weight of the situation crashed over me. $240,000. Gone. My emergency fund, my house repair savings, my investment portfolio. Everything I had carefully built over a decade of disciplined work and saving. The violation went beyond money. The betrayal by family cut deep, reopening old wounds I thought had healed long ago. Memories flooded back of Alicia, my college girlfriend, who had borrowed my credit card for emergencies and maxed it out shopping for herself and another guy. The humiliation of discovering her betrayal had nearly broken me then. This was 1,000 times worse. I splashed cold water on my face, forcing myself to focus. I had 5 minutes to decide. Let Rick walk away with my life savings or fight back. The choice was clear, but the path forward less so. Direct confrontation was dangerous. Rick had already shown his willingness to use physical intimidation. And who knew what else he might do if cornered? Going through my bank would take time I didn't have, with no guarantee of recovery. Which left law enforcement. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. 911. "What is your emergency?" "I need to report a theft," I murmured. "My brother-in-law has stolen over $200,000 from my accounts overnight. He's still in my house, and the situation is becoming volatile." The dispatcher asked for my address and details, assuring me officers would be dispatched immediately. Try to remain calm and avoid confrontation until police arrive. "Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't think so. But he's becoming aggressive," I whispered. "Please hurry. Officers are en route. Estimated arrival in 7 minutes. Can you safely stay away from him until then?" "I'll try. He expects me back from the bathroom soon. I'll keep the line open in my pocket if I can. That would be helpful. Remember, your safety is the priority." I tucked the phone into my shirt pocket, call still connected but muted on my end. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the bathroom door and returned to my office, schooling my features into a mask of resignation. Rick and Jessica had moved to the small sitting area in the corner of my office. Jessica's eyes were red and swollen, tissue crumpled in her hand. Rick sat too close to her, his posture deceptively relaxed but his eyes sharp and calculating. "So," I began, taking a seat behind my desk, putting solid wood between us. "Let's talk about how we move forward." Rick straightened, clearly surprised by my suddenly cooperative tone. "Now you're being reasonable. Here's what happens. We walk away. Nobody reports anything. And in a few years when we're back on our feet, maybe we pay you back some of it." "Some of it?" I raised an eyebrow. "Be realistic, Luke. You know how these things go. But family helps family, right? Jessica will feel better if we at least acknowledge it as a loan." I glanced at my sister, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "And what assurances do I have that you won't simply disappear to Cancun or wherever else those flight confirmations were for?" Rick had the decency to look momentarily abashed. "That was just a backup plan. A precaution." "A precaution," I repeated flatly. Like stealing my entire savings was a precaution against what? The possibility I might not give you money. "If you simply asked, would you have?" Rick challenged. "Would you really have given us $200,000 if we asked?" "We would never have asked for that much," Jessica interjected, her voice small but firm. "That's an insane amount, Rick. We needed help with medical bills. Not whatever this is." I leaned forward, focusing on Rick. "What other debts did you mention earlier? The ones Jessica doesn't know about?" Rick shifted uncomfortably. Just some business investments that didn't pan out. Business investments, I echoed. Or gambling debts? The flash of panic in Rick's eyes confirmed my suspicion before he could compose himself. That's ridiculous. Is it? Jessica, did you know Rick has a PokerStars account? Or accounts with 3 different sports betting apps? Jessica's head snapped up. What? How do you know that? His browsing history on the laptop he left here. Quite the active player, from what I could see in the few minutes I had to check. You're making that up, Rick snarled, but his confidence was cracking. Am I? Would you like me to power up your laptop right now and show Jessica exactly what I found? Or maybe we should discuss the messages from someone named Vince, threatening consequences for unpaid debts. Rick lunged to his feet. That's private property. You had no right, like you had no right to access my financial accounts. I countered, standing my ground. How long has this been going on, Rick? How long have you been gambling with money you don't have? Stop it, Jessica cried. Both of you, just stop. Rick turned to her, suddenly gentle, the manipulator shifting tactics. Jess, baby, he's trying to turn you against me. Yes. I play poker sometimes, but it's just recreation. Luke is exaggerating to distract from the real issue. He has more than he needs while we're struggling. I reached for my bag under the desk, watching Rick's eyes track my movement. Then you won't mind what's coming next. What's that supposed to mean? Rick demanded. I pulled out a small digital recorder. Insurance. My own kind. Rick and Jessica stared at the device, then at each other. A second later, they both laughed. Seriously, Luke? Rick snorted. You think a recording will help you? It's your word against ours. 2 against 1. Against us? Jessica repeated, turning to Rick with dawning realization. I never agreed to any of this. I'm not backing up your lies. Rick grabbed her arm. Jessica, think carefully about your next words. The gesture, controlling and threatening, seemed to flip a switch in my sister. She wrenched her arm away from him. Don't touch me like that. Ever again. You know what will happen if you turn on me, Rick hissed. Are you threatening my sister now? I demanded, taking a step forward. Rick turned back to me, desperation clear in his eyes. You're not calling the shots here, Luke. I have your money. It's gone. Transferred through multiple accounts. Impossible to trace. You have nothing. I have this. I held up the recorder. Every word you've said since I returned, including your admission about using Jessica's fingerprint to bypass authentication, the confirmation that you transferred my money, and now your threat to my sister. Rick's face contorted with rage. He started toward me, fists clenched, when a thunderous banging shook the front door. Police, open up. Rick froze, his face draining of color. He turned to me, realization dawning. You called them. When you were in the bathroom, I nodded slowly. The call is still connected in my pocket. They heard everything. As if on cue, the banging came again, louder this time. Paulus, we have a warrant. Open the door now. Rick looked wildly around the room, like a cornered animal seeking escape. Jessica, tell them this is a misunderstanding. A family dispute. Nothing more. Jessica stood, wiping her tears, her spine straightening with newfound resolve. No, Rick. This ends now. All of it. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the house as the front door gave way under police battering. Heavy footsteps approached rapidly. Rick made a desperate dash for his laptop, but I blocked his path. It's over, Rick. This isn't over, he snarled, backing toward the window. Not by a long shot. The office door flew open, and 2 police officers entered with weapons drawn. Hands up. Don't move. Rick froze, then slowly raised his hands, his expression morphing from rage to calculated charm. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. Richard Taylor? One officer confirmed. We have a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of grand theft and computer fraud. As they handcuffed Rick, reading him his rights, I caught his final glare. The mask had completely dropped, revealing the predator beneath. In that moment, I knew that my family would never be the same again. The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements, evidence collection, and emotional exhaustion. Officers photographed my office, took possession of Rick's laptop, and documented the bank transactions on my computer. A detective specializing in financial crimes arrived, asking detailed questions about my security setup and how Rick might have gained access to my accounts. I explained everything. The family reunion, the suspicious behavior, discovering the theft, and the confrontation. When I mentioned Jessica's unwitting role in the scheme, her fingerprint used without her knowledge, the detective nodded, sympathetically. "We see this pattern frequently," he explained. "Family fraud often involves manipulating one family member to gain access to another's assets." "Mrs. Taylor, we'll need your statement as well." Jessica sat in the corner of the living room, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Am I going to be arrested too?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Based on the recording and your brother's statement, it appears you were unaware of your husband's intentions," the detective assured her. "We'll need to investigate thoroughly, but at this point, you're being treated as a witness, not an accomplice." Relief washed over her face, immediately followed by shame. I should have known. There were so many signs. While the police continued processing the scene, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Luke? Your father and I just got a strange call from Jessica. Something about Rick being arrested?" "What's happening?" I stepped onto the back porch for privacy and explained the situation as gently as possible. My mother's gasp of horror turned to quiet weeping. "We're coming over right now," she insisted, and no amount of assurance that I was okay could dissuade her. Within an hour, my parents arrived, faces etched with concern. My mother immediately embraced me. Then Jessica, holding her daughter, as she broke down completely. My father stood rigid with anger when he learned the full extent of Rick's betrayal. "I never trusted that man," he muttered. "Always talking about money, showing off things he clearly couldn't afford. I should have said something years ago. It wouldn't have made a difference," Jessica said, wiping her eyes. I was completely under his spell. He always had explanations for everything, made me doubt myself whenever I questioned him." The detective, overhearing this, approached with a gentle expression. "Mrs. Taylor, with your permission, I'd like to examine your personal financial records as well. In cases like this, it's common for spouses to be victims of financial abuse long before others are targeted." Jessica nodded numbly. "I haven't had access to our main accounts for years. Rick said he was better with money, that I would just stress about bills, so he handled everything. I just had a small checking account for personal expenses." The detective nodded knowingly. Classic financial control tactic. Isolation. Then dependence. As the day progressed, more family members heard about the situation and began calling or arriving at the house. Uncle James and Aunt Patricia brought food, correctly assuming none of us had eaten. My cousin Michael, who had warned me about Rick using my computer, expressed guilt for not being more insistent about the danger. "You tried to alert me," I assured him. "I just didn't want to believe it." By evening, the police had concluded their initial investigation at the house. Rick remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk, after they discovered multiple aliases and passport applications on his laptop. The financial trail was complex, the detective warned me, with money moving through several shell accounts before disappearing into cryptocurrency transactions designed to be difficult to trace. "I won't lie to you, Mr. Wagner," he said, using my last name formally. "Recovery of funds in these cases is challenging. We'll freeze what we can find, but prepare yourself for the possibility that much of it may be gone permanently." The words hit me like a physical blow. My entire financial safety net, potentially gone forever. "What happens next?" I asked, trying to focus on process rather than panic. "We build our case. The evidence is strong. The transfers originated from your IP address but with login attempts first from his laptop. His browser history shows research on how to move money untraceably. The recorded confession helps immensely. And Jessica?" I glanced at my sister, who had fallen into exhausted sleep on the couch. My mother sitting vigil beside her. "Based on everything we've seen, she appears to be another victim. We'll continue investigating, but unless evidence suggests otherwise, she won't face charges." After the police finally left, promising to update me regularly, The house felt eerily quiet. My parents insisted on staying the night, unwilling to leave either Jessica or me alone. As we sat in the kitchen picking at the food Uncle James had brought, my father broke the silence. "Luke, about your finances. Your mother and I can help. We don't have much, but our retirement accounts—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "Absolutely not. This is bad enough without dragging your retirement into it. But son, Dad, please. I'll figure it out. I have income, good credit, and some assets Rick couldn't touch. It's a setback, not the end of the world." The words were more confident than I felt. Inside, I was calculating years of rebuilding, potentially postponing major life goals indefinitely. But the determination in my voice seemed to reassure my parents, at least temporarily. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found Jessica sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold tea. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked, sliding into the chair across from her. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face when they arrested him. Not sad or sorry, just calculating, like he was already planning his next move." She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed but dry. How did I not see who he really was? "Con men are skilled at what they do," I said gently. "And it's different when you love someone. You want to believe the best about them." "The detective showed me our financial records," she whispered. "My inheritance from Grandma? Gone. The money I thought we were saving for a house? Gambled away. The medical bills he said we couldn't pay? Most were paid by insurance. But he told me they weren't and kept the reimbursements." Her voice broke. 5 years of my life, Luke. 5 years of lies. I reached across the table and took her hand. "What will you do now? Divorce him?" "Obviously." The detective gave me information about victim services, financial counseling, even a support group for people whose partners had gambling addictions. She squeezed my hand. "But first, I need to make things right with you." "Jessica, you don't." "I do," she insisted. "I brought him into your life, into our family. I should have seen the warning signs. And now you've lost everything because of it." "Not everything," I corrected her. "Not even close. Money can be replaced. Family can't." For the first time that day, Jessica smiled faintly. "When did my little brother get so wise?" "Probably around the time I realized what actually matters." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. I contacted my bank's fraud department, though they confirmed what the detective had said: recovery would be difficult given how quickly the money had been moved and converted. I placed freezes on my credit reports, changed every password I had, and began the process of rebuilding my security from the ground up. Jessica met with a divorce attorney recommended by the victim services coordinator, starting proceedings immediately. My parents helped her move her belongings from the apartment she had shared with Rick into their home temporarily. Throughout that day, the broader impact of Rick's actions rippled through our extended family. Aunt Patricia discovered her identity had been used to open a credit card she knew nothing about. Uncle James found unexplained charges on his account from times when Rick had visited their home. The detective confirmed our growing suspicion. Rick hadn't just targeted me. I had simply been the biggest score in a long pattern of financial predation. As we gathered that evening to support each other through the aftermath, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was the detective. "Mr. Wagner, we found something you should know about. Your brother-in-law has done this before. Multiple times. Different names, different states, but the same pattern. He marries into a family, isolates his spouse, then systematically drains resources from the entire family network before disappearing." The floor seemed to drop beneath me. "He's done this before? To other families?" "At least 3 that we can document so far. He's wanted in Colorado and Arizona under different names. We're coordinating with authorities there now." "And those families? Did they ever recover their money?" The detective's pause told me everything. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wagner. In most cases, the funds were never located." As I hung up, I looked around at my family, wounded, betrayed, but together, and supporting each other. The road ahead would be difficult, but in that moment, I made a promise to myself. Rick had taken my money, but he would not take my future or my family's well-being. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The weeks following Rick's arrest unfolded in a series of painful but necessary steps toward recovery. Each day brought new revelations about the extent of his deception. Each one another blow to our family's sense of security and trust. The banking investigation progressed slowly. My accounts were restored and secured with enhanced verification protocols, but the transferred funds remained elusive. The forensic accountants traced approximately $78,000 to accounts that were successfully frozen before Rick could move the money. But the remaining $162,000 had been converted to cryptocurrency and transferred through various digital wallets designed to obscure the trail. Think of it as recovering about 30 cents on the dollar, my new financial advisor explained during our first meeting. Not ideal, but better than many victims in similar situations. I tried to focus on the recovered portion rather than the loss, but rebuilding my financial life proved challenging. I developed a strict budget, cutting all non-essential expenses. My emergency fund was gone, so every unexpected cost. A minor car repair, a plumbing issue in the house, induced disproportionate anxiety. I considered selling my home but ultimately decided against it. The emotional cost of surrendering the space I had worked so hard to secure felt too high. Work became both refuge and challenge. I threw myself into projects, taking on extra assignments for additional income. When my supervisor noticed my increased hours and asked if everything was all right, I finally explained the situation. "Luke, that's terrible," she said, genuine concern in her voice. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? The company has an employee emergency fund for situations like this." Her kindness caught me off guard, breaching the wall of self-sufficiency I had built. I accepted the company's offer of financial assistance as a short-term loan, something I would never have considered before. The experience taught me an important lesson. Accepting help didn't diminish my independence. It acknowledged my humanity. While I focused on financial recovery, Jessica faced her own challenges. The divorce proceedings moved forward, complicated by Rick's ongoing criminal case. She moved into a small apartment, starting over at 36 with little more than personal belongings and a shattered sense of trust. I visited her frequently, often finding her surrounded by self-help books on financial independence, emotional abuse recovery, and rebuilding after betrayal. Despite everything, her resilience amazed me. "I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored," she told me one evening as we shared takeout on her sparsely furnished balcony. "He always insisted on handling the finances because I was too emotional about money. He would make big purchases without consulting me, then make me feel childish for questioning them. Classic financial abuse. And I never recognized it. You can't blame yourself," I insisted. "He was skilled at manipulation. That's what predators do." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "The support group has helped me understand that. Did you know there are thousands of people like me? Partners of gambling addicts who had no idea until everything collapsed?" She sighed, pushing food around her plate. "The counselor says healing starts with forgiveness. But I'm not there yet. Not with Rick. And honestly, not with myself either. My parents struggled with their own forms of guilt. My father, always protective of his children, felt he should have seen through Rick's facade. My mother questioned every interaction, wondering if she could have intervened earlier. Family therapy became a weekly commitment, a space where we could voice these doubts and fears without judgment. Family systems are complex, our therapist explained during one particularly emotional session. When someone like Rick enters that system, they specifically look for the connections and values they can exploit. Your close family bonds, your trust in each other, your willingness to help in times of need, these strengths became vulnerabilities in the hands of someone determined to exploit them. The criminal investigation expanded as authorities uncovered Rick's previous identities and victims. Jessica was horrified to learn she was his fourth wife, the previous three having experienced similar patterns of isolation and financial abuse. One woman from Denver contacted Jessica directly, offering support as someone who had survived the same ordeal 3 years earlier. Talking to Michelle changed everything. Jessica told me after their first phone call. She's rebuilt her life completely. New career, healthy relationship, financial stability. If she could do it after what Rick did to her, so can I. My personal security measures verged on paranoia. I installed a comprehensive home security system, with cameras covering every approach to the house. My computer security rivaled corporate standards, with multiple authentication factors and encrypted backups. I checked my credit report weekly, scanning for any suspicious activity. The hypervigilance is normal, my therapist assured me during a private session. Your sense of safety was violated in a fundamental way. These measures help you regain a feeling of control. Will I ever trust people again? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Trust isn't binary, all or nothing. Healthy trust is discerning, built slowly through consistent behavior. You're not learning not to trust. You're learning to trust wisely. 4 months after the theft, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Michael. Luke, I just got promoted at the cybersecurity firm, and we're expanding our consumer protection division. We need someone who understands both the technical and personal sides of financial fraud. Would you consider consulting for us part-time? The offer took me by surprise. Michael, I'm the last person who should be advising on security. I couldn't even protect my own accounts. That's exactly why you're perfect, he countered. You understand the emotional aspects that technical experts often miss, the trust factors, the family dynamics. Plus, your experience as a victim gives you credibility with clients that no certification could provide. After consideration, I accepted. The consulting work not only supplemented my income during a critical rebuilding period, but gave purpose to my experience. Helping others protect themselves against similar predators transformed my victimhood into expertise, my pain into preventative wisdom. 6 months into our recovery journey, our family gathered for a modest Thanksgiving at my parents' home, the first holiday since the incident. The atmosphere was subdued compared to previous years, the empty chair where Rick would have sat a visible reminder of our collective trauma. During dinner, Jessica cleared her throat nervously. I have some news, she announced. I've been accepted to a financial counseling certification program. Once I complete it, I'll be working with a nonprofit that helps women recovering from financial abuse. The table erupted in supportive exclamations and questions. Watching my sister's face light up as she described her new path, I felt a surge of pride and hope. The wounds were still fresh, the losses still significant, but something new was emerging from the ashes of what Rick had destroyed. Later, as we cleared dishes together, Jessica bumped my shoulder gently. Hey, remember when we were kids and that bully stole your bike? I smiled at the memory. And you marched right up to him the next day and demanded it back while I hid behind a tree? You were always the cautious one, and I was the impulsive one. She laughed. Look at us now. I'm carefully planning every step of my future, and you're the one who faced down Rick when it mattered most. Maybe we've both grown in ways we needed to, I suggested. Jessica nodded, her eyes suddenly serious. Luke, I never properly thanked you. Not just for confronting Rick, but for not giving up on me afterward. You had every right to blame me, to cut me off completely. You're my sister, I said simply. That hasn't changed. That night, driving home to my still too quiet house, I realized something had shifted inside me. The anger still surfaced occasionally. The financial anxiety remained a daily companion. But alongside these difficulties had grown something unexpected, a deeper understanding of what truly constituted wealth in my life. The support of family, the solidarity of colleagues, the resilience we had discovered in ourselves. These were assets no thief could ever transfer away. 1 year after the day Rick was arrested, I stood in the courtroom watching as he was sentenced. The judge's words echoed through the chamber. Richard Taylor, on the counts of grand theft, identity fraud, and financial exploitation, this court sentences you to 8 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims identified in this case. Rick showed no remorse, his face impassive as officers led him away. Jessica, standing beside me, let out a long breath she seemed to have been holding for months. It's finally over, she whispered. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. The legal proceedings had concluded, but the ripple effects of Rick's actions would continue to influence our lives for years to come. The court-ordered restitution was largely symbolic. Financial investigators had traced only about $103,000 of the stolen funds, and Rick had no legitimate assets from which to pay the remainder. Outside the courthouse, our family gathered on the steps. My parents, now in their 70s, had aged noticeably during the ordeal. Uncle James and Aunt Patricia, themselves victims of Rick's smaller schemes, stood with their arms around each other. Cousins, extended family, and even a few of Rick's previous victims had come to witness the conclusion of this chapter. "What now?" my father asked as we walked toward the parking lot. "Now we truly begin to heal," my mother answered for all of us. Without the uncertainty of the trial hanging over us, the question of healing had occupied much of my thinking over the past year. The financial recovery had progressed steadily, if slowly, through careful budgeting, my consulting work with Michael's firm, and a modest promotion at my main job. I had rebuilt an emergency fund and begun contributing to retirement accounts again. The house remained mine, though I had taken in a roommate, a carefully vetted colleague who needed temporary housing during a divorce to help with expenses. The emotional recovery proved more complex. Trust came less easily now. Each new relationship subject to a level of scrutiny that sometimes felt exhausting. I had started dating again, but found myself conducting subtle background checks on potential partners, a habit my therapist gently encouraged me to moderate. "Verification isn't the enemy of trust," she had explained. "It's the foundation of informed trust. The key is finding balance enough verification for peace of mind, but not so much that connection becomes impossible." Jessica's transformation had been remarkable. The financial counseling certification led to full-time work with a nonprofit supporting abuse survivors. She had become an advocate, speaking at community events about recognizing the signs of financial control and exploitation. Her divorce finalized, she had legally reclaimed her maiden name, Wagner. A symbolic break from the years with Rick. The irony, she told me during a Sunday lunch at my place, is that I'm better with money now than I ever was before. I understand financial systems, security protocols, investment strategies. Rick's attempt to keep me financially ignorant backfired completely. Our family dynamics had evolved as well. The annual reunion tradition continued, though with significant changes. We rotated hosting duties among multiple households, rather than placing the burden on one person. Financial discussions, once considered taboo, now occurred openly and constructively. Younger family members received gentle education about protecting their assets and recognizing manipulation. 6 months after the sentencing, I received an unexpected email from a producer at a major news program. They were developing a special report on family financial fraud and had heard about our case through the prosecutor's office. Would I consider being interviewed? My initial reaction was reluctance. Exposing our family's painful experience to national attention seemed unnecessary and potentially reopening wounds. But when I mentioned it to Jessica, her perspective surprised me. "You should do it," she said firmly. "Think about how many families might recognize their own situations and get help before it's too late." After consulting with our parents and the family members most affected, I agreed to the interview with one condition. The focus would be on education and prevention, not sensationalizing our trauma. The producer readily agreed. The segment aired 3 months later. Sitting in my living room surrounded by family, watching our story unfold on screen, I experienced a complex mix of emotions, lingering pain, yes, but also pride in how we had navigated the aftermath, and hope that our experience might help others. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My email inbox filled with messages from viewers, sharing similar experiences, or thanking us for helping them recognize concerning patterns in their own families. The cybersecurity firm, where I consulted, reported a surge in inquiries about family financial security services. One email particularly stood out. A woman in Arizona described how watching our story had given her the courage to question her son-in-law's increasingly controlling behavior toward her daughter's finances. Her intervention had revealed early stages of a similar scheme, potentially saving her family from our fate. "You turned your worst experience into a protection for my family," she wrote. "I can never thank you enough." Her words crystallized something I had been feeling but couldn't articulate. Meaning had emerged from meaningless harm. The senseless violation we experienced had, through our response to it, become a source of positive change beyond ourselves. 2 years to the day after discovering the theft, I hosted a different kind of gathering at my home. Not the traditional family reunion, but what we had come to call our resilience anniversary. Jessica brought her new boyfriend, a kind accountant she had met through her advocacy work and had been dating for 6 months after thorough vetting by both of us. A process he had understood and respected. My parents arrived with photo albums documenting family history, including the difficult chapter we had survived together. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and close friends who had supported us filled the backyard with conversation and laughter that no longer felt forced or fragile. As twilight settled, I called for everyone's attention and raised my glass. 2 years ago, I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I was wrong. What I discovered instead was that what truly matters can't be transferred out of an account or stolen in the night. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. I learned that wealth isn't just numbers on a statement, I continued. Real wealth is knowing who stands beside you when those numbers disappear. It's the wisdom gained through painful experience. It's the ability to rebuild, not just financially, but emotionally and relationally. I looked at Jessica, who smiled through tears. I learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful actions, but refusing to let those actions define our future. Rick took enough from us. I wasn't going to give him my capacity for trust or connection as well. My father stepped forward, placing his hand on my shoulder. And we learned that family isn't just about shared DNA or history. It's about who chooses to remain when remaining gets difficult, who helps carry burdens rather than adding to them. As the evening progressed, conversations naturally turned to the practical lessons we had all integrated into our lives. Uncle James described the enhanced security measures he had implemented for his small business. My cousin shared resources for teaching children about healthy financial boundaries. Jessica outlined warning signs of financial control in relationships that everyone should recognize. Later, as guests were leaving, a young second cousin who had recently graduated college pulled me aside. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said quietly. "Watching how you handled everything changed how I think about money and relationships. I'm much more careful now, but not in a scared way, in a smart way." Her words stayed with me long after the house had emptied, and I sat alone on the back porch, reflecting on the journey. The financial wound remained. I had recovered less than half of what was stolen, and rebuilding complete financial security would take years more. But the emotional and relational healing had progressed beyond what I could have imagined in those first dark days. The betrayal had changed me, certainly. I was more cautious, more vigilant about security, less naive about human nature. But it had not hardened me in the ways I had initially feared. If anything, meaningful connections in my life had deepened through shared adversity. New relationships were approached with appropriate verification, yes, but also with an enhanced appreciation for authentic trust when it was earned. As I prepared for bed that night, I noticed the date on my calendar exactly 1 week until the next court-mandated victim impact report was due for Rick's parole hearing. I had dreaded these reports initially, finding it painful to revisit the harm done. Now, I approached them differently, seeing them as opportunities to document not just what was taken, but what had been built in its place. This time, I would write not only about the continued financial impact, but about the strength, wisdom, and community that had grown from the ashes of betrayal. Rick had taken my money, but he had inadvertently given me a deeper understanding of true wealth, the kind that no one could ever steal. Before turning in, I opened my laptop to check tomorrow's schedule and saw a notification from my bank. The quarterly automatic transfer to the foundation Jessica and I had established had completed successfully. The Family Financial Safety Network now provided education, resources, and emergency assistance to victims of family financial fraud across 3 states. What began as our personal tragedy had expanded into a mission that helped dozens of families annually. I smiled at the symmetry. Money flowing out of my account. But this time by my choice, toward healing rather than harm. Perhaps that was the most profound lesson of all, that even our worst experiences when met with resilience and purpose, can be transformed into something that serves rather than diminishes our humanity. So what about you? Has someone you trusted ever betrayed your confidence? How did you rebuild that sense of security afterward? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, in sharing our stories, we create connections that remind us we're never alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the strength to transform your hardships into wisdom.